Nothing gets musicians more worked up than plagiarism. This thing that we all do is sacred. There are unspoken rules that should never be broken. But when they are broken and we all get upset, there are a number of recurring things I've seen that people just straight up get wrong and a lot of nuance that gets glossed over. Today we're going to clear some things up because if you want to have strong opinions, there's some necessary information you need to back them up. Now we're getting into the weeds a bit with this one. This is a murky topic, but you know what shouldn't be murky is your understanding of some fundamental guitar musical concepts, which is why I made a free guitar reference ebook. In it, there's over 50 pages of chords, diagrams, scales, musical theories, the material that every guitar player really should know. If I had this handy at every stage of my musical journey, it would have made my life so much easier. Grab it for free using the link in the description. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, everybody knows that stealing is bad. We're taught from a young age not to do it. But when it comes to music, is that always true? And what does it even mean to steal something when it's not a physical object? Now, the obvious answer when it comes to music is when somebody writes something and you say, I made that. That's obviously a problem. But that wasn't really an issue, at least in a legal sense, until the 60s. The first major case of musical plagiarism came with the Beach Boys' hit, Surfin' USA, and a judge ruled that this song was close enough to Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16 that Chuck was awarded a writing credit long after the fact. And if laws are meant to reflect a society's morality, it would seem that us caring about musical plagiarism is a fairly recent phenomenon. In the folk tradition, ownership of music is much more communal, if the idea of ownership even applies. Like Sakura Sakura, the most popular Japanese melody, nobody even knows who wrote it. Somebody did. They played it for the next person, who played it for the next person. Before long, everybody knew it. And that's just kind of how most music outside of European classical music existed for pretty much all of humanity. The idea of authenticity through composition just wasn't really a thing, even into the 1900s. Most songs were written in Tin Pan Alley and performed by the performer. A guy like Frank Sinatra didn't write any of his songs. Elvis only has one notable writing credit and nobody cared. This shifts with the Beach Boys and then the Beatles come along and the landscape is completely changed and suddenly writing your own music is something that actually really matters. Now, a big part of music for me is believing the performer is connected with the song. That's easier to believe if they wrote it. But of course, there's also plenty of cases where somebody draws all the emotion they ever could out of a song that they didn't write. And there's kind of like the spectrum of what's acceptable when it comes to taking somebody else's art for yourself. Drawing inspiration, that's fine. That's encouraged. Doing a cover of a song, that's also fine, but there are some steps you need to take to make sure it's fine. Plagiarism, that's bad. Straight up stealing something, that's really bad. In the folk tradition, when things are just passed along orally, no one knows who wrote what, none of this matters. But when the technology exists to capture those songs and then money becomes involved, this complicates matters. Because if my song can be reproduced and sold in mass quantities and I'm not seeing any of that, then that's a problem. So where do we draw the line between inspiration, cover, plagiarism, and stealing? With a cover song, it's actually pretty straightforward, legally speaking. You can record somebody else's song after it's been recorded once without their permission. Now there's some nuance here. You can't make major changes to the lyrics or the melody. As well, this compulsory license doesn't cover the ability to put your cover song to a video. Now remember this point, it'll come up again later in this video. You can cover a song without permission, but in order to make a video of you playing that cover, you need an additional license, which is called a sync license. Now, the other thing that you have to do when it comes to cover songs is pay a percentage of what your song generates to the original author, which is easy enough through a number of services. And we're good with this. No one says it's inauthentic to cover a song. Maybe it's less authentic than if you wrote it, but we're good with it. And for the most part, that's because everybody is benefiting from this. It's not stealing. It's not plagiarism. I can't profit at someone else's expense because if I make money, they're going to make money too if it's done correctly, and everybody's happy. And for a long time, this all works great, but then social media comes around. Because unless you're in the music industry, you probably didn't know how copyright works before watching this video. And in the past, that's totally fine because if I want to play a song, there are a lot of people standing between me recording that song and it reaching the public. At some point, one of these gatekeepers is going to at least let me know that I got to take care of this copyright stuff. But when YouTube and social media starts taking off, people start breaking the law left, right, and center because nobody knows any better. And remember, you also technically need a sync license to put these cover songs onto your YouTube videos. And that law made sense when only TV and film studios had cameras and a means to distribute things. But in the social media sphere, this law has essentially become meaningless, and we have this problem where a cover song can directly benefit the performer and have no benefit for the author. That shared monetary gain that made a cover morally acceptable is now gone. what do we do? So as you can see, technology has far outpaced the law, and the music industry has just kind of thrown up its hands, turned a blind eye to it, because what are you gonna do? You got some 12-year-old kid playing Slash solos for 20 people on his Instagram. The law clearly says you can't do this, but as a society, we're like, yeah, this is fine. We got no issue with this. But at what point does this become an issue? But what if he blows up by doing these Slash solos note for note? What does he owe Guns N' Roses? Does he owe them some of his Patreon? Does he owe them a cut of the merch that he sells? Does he owe them nothing? And we're getting into that murky gray area of what we should deem is acceptable. And part of this is that we all know that the kid didn't write the Sweet Child of Mine solo. He's not taking credit. He's not stealing. And I don't think anyone would even give him flack for not crediting Slash. We just know. In a sense, we've kind of circled back to that folk tradition thing where some of these super popular songs are so well known that we kind of don't really need to credit anyone for them. But where do we draw that line? And that's where things get complicated. I mean, I know when someone does something and it just feels wrong, and I know when something feels okay. But this is subjective. And like I said, we can't really defer to the legality around this because it's so dated, and I don't think any of us want a harsh crackdown on covers on social media to the letter of the law. But now, as a community, we're just kind of stuck vibing it out, which works fine for extreme cases, but leaves a lot of murky middle ground. Now, plagiarism is defined as not giving appropriate credit for something that you didn't come up with. But in the social media age, what even is considered appropriate credit? Tagging a collaborator post, saying something in the description, in the title, and when does something become so well known that it's not even necessary to give credit? And then we gotta look at inspiration. When does that become stealing? It's another murky mess, because, everything I and most other guitar players do can in one way or another be traced back to something we stole from someone else. In music circles, there's a different term besides stealing, which doesn't have the same connotations: lifting. Musicians lift from other musicians. It's an integral part of development. I've been taking from my favorite musicians my whole life. I've learned so many Stevie Ray Vaughan solos, note for note, tried to force them into my subconscious, and then see if they'll come out naturally later. If all I ever did was just copy and replay Stevie Ray Vaughan solos, this would not get much respect at all, unless it's in the practice or education type setting. But if you do this with countless different guitar players digesting what they played, it mixes around and eventually comes out as something mostly unique. And when a musician gets to this point, we're mostly good with them quoting or directly referencing other pieces of music. It's seen as a tip of the hat. It's seen as respectable, even if it's technically plagiarism. You remove the extreme cases, and that line between inspiration and plagiarism becomes very difficult to define. There's been so many lawsuits about this kind of thing. Did Led Zeppelin steal the intro to Stairway to Heaven? Did Ed Sheeran rip off Marvin Gaye? Did Vanilla Ice steal from Queen and David Bowie? There's no way to definitively draw that line. So what the courts deem as right or wrong ends up going on a case-by-case basis, and whether the courts got that right or not is subjective. And musicians are sensitive about this stuff for a variety of reasons. First of all, authenticity is at the core of this art form, and if you have gone so far as to cheat that thing, it's kind of a cardinal sin. And then technology has made it so that it's hard just to figure out not even what's authentic, but what's real. And so when somebody comes across as inauthentic, be it from plagiarism or something else, we're primed for a big reaction to that. There's actually a whole tangent here about what even is real in the day and age of social media, but that will have to wait for another day. Because I think one of the most glaring issues that has become even more problematic at this point in time is the money situation in the music industry is so dire. If there's this healthy middle class of musicians that we all live in, and somebody steals from me, that's definitely bad. But if we're all doing okay, the reaction is going to be different than the reality that we live in now. And when somebody who has takes from somebody who has not, all these people down here relate to this guy, and that underlying frustration bubbles over and it's directed at that guy. And I think it's important to discuss this and look at the nuance, because we as a community kind of are the ones who have to enforce this. Getting the law involved is unpredictable, it's time intensive, it's costly, and the guitar gods aren't coming down from the sky to make everything right either. And these broader concepts I've talked about are things that, they apply to the past, they apply to the present, and they will apply again in the future. And we got to understand the depth of this so that when it is appropriate, we can confidently say, yeah, fuck that guy for stealing from that guy, or hey, this one seems all right, and acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of middle ground there as well. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I hope that we can continue to have these informed, rational discussions that don't devolve into us just yelling at each other. And remember, you can grab my free ebook when you use the link in the description. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.